So 100 games, Joe, coming up against Port Vale. In one sense, it's flown by. In another time, it feels like you've been here for quite a long time.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes you have to pinch yourself that it's, you know, it is nearly 2 years. You know what I mean, in 100 games. So you do lose track of it because you're just caught up in the preparing for the next game kind of mindset. But then when you sit and think about it, I mean, just going through the first team with you there, you do realise how long ago it was. It does feel like an eternity on the other side of that, and you think about all the games. I mean, you know, losing in that opening game to Wigan late on, you know, was a real tough blow, and you know, sitting here 100 games, as I say, in on the weekend, and so much has happened. It's been an incredible journey, but again, it does just feel like we're only just starting out here.
Part of the dream, I guess, that you're sold to come to Bristol Rovers would be a new stadium at some point in the future. Is that sort of something that I think is really important to the future of the club?
I think it's massive for the future of the club. Yeah, I think, you know, everybody's aware of that. For me, it wasn't, you know, spade going in the ground and manager tenure. What's the average tenure? Like 9 months, something like that. You don't expect to, you know, to see a new stadium built. I think if you're a manager and you're part of a club that plans and then builds and then opens a new stadium and you're still there, it points to a fantastic job you've done. I think of like kind of Thomas Frank at Brentford, you know, certainly springs to mind, and that points to sustained success over a consistent period. I think, you know, if we achieve that, then that could happen here. But you know, in terms of being sold a dream, I knew how big Rovers were from the games we'd played against them, and I felt, you know, the atmosphere that was created here, and obviously once I came down and met Weil, you know, when I spoke to Weil, I kind of knew he was a good guy to work for. When I came down and met Martin Starnes and Tommy Widrington, I initially rejected the job, and I think I was proved right on you know, the reservations I had for where the club was. And then it was when I spoke to the owner, so, you know, that really flicked it over, because I thought he's a fantastic guy who's got great ambition and great ideas, but he's been let down by people who he's entrusted to do a good job for him. And I remember driving away from me and I said that'd be a great project to the team that's close to me if it wasn't for the CEO and the director of football. I just felt there were going to be huge problems in moving the club where it needed to move to, and thankfully, you know, further conversations with Weil, you know, explained further the kind of power structure and the way you would work going forwards, and at that point I was like, okay, I think I can do something here, and as I say, you know, we've got involved and came down, and the rest is history.
You've certainly got your own managerial style, Joe. Think back, how old were you when you thought, you know what, I think I'd like to give that a go?
Oh, look, I've been at this a long period. We had a school teacher in the junior school I was in, Norman Ailcock, Mr. Ailcock, who was from the suburbs around Liverpool. So Liverpool's like a hotbed of football, and there's such a competitive football area. I mean, did you see it? We've produced the most England internationals out of every other city, every other county, including Liverpool has the most full internationals, something like that for England. Study done in the build-up to the World Cup in the Athletic, behind the subscription paywall. So, you know, it's for the petty bourgeois. I understand that's not for everybody. And on the outside of that, they're not so much known for football. It's, you know, some football territories, but it's rugby league and kind of other sports that grow in those places. And Mr. Ailcock was not from, or wasn't a footballer himself, but it was tasked with running a school team because it was a very female-dominated teaching environment, and he was one of the few males. And my dad was a really good amateur footballer, played all the way up until, you know, just below the conference, but come from a mad keen football area, and obviously had one of my parents was mad into his football, and I used to tag along everywhere with them. So I was in the dressing room at Knowsley United as a young person from the age of like 5, 6, 7, mainly because I had to. There was no childcare. Then when I go into school, I'm quite good at football, so you become a school player. And then when I went to the junior school, Mr. Alcock didn't know his arse from his elbow pretty much. And he knew I was good at football, so in the end he'd say, well, can you pick the team? So at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, you know, I'm already picking the team and the tactics for our school team. And by the way, I went to a school, St Agnes School, that had won nothing for 25, 30 years in the area. There was a lot of big other football schools in there. And under my managerial, if that's what you want to call it, like player manager role, we won what was known as the Hanson Cup, and I'll get you some photos of it. We won the Hanson Cup, which is a big cup in our area for the primary schools, for the first time in 28 years, I think. And then we won it every year until I left to go into the seniors. So they'd never won that before. We had obviously overreached what was the school's normal potential in that. So at that point, you know, mainly because I was good at football, I was probably one of the better young footballers in the area, but also, you know, I knew how to organise teams and I'd structured it round us. I always, when I was on the playground, they'd always leave me to sort the teams out to make sure the games were fair, mainly because if I went on one side and all other good players were on it, it'd be a mismatch on the playground. So I was always managing the playground to make sure the games were fair at break times, because, you know, I used to weight the teams against myself, so I'd have a harder job winning. But most of the time I'd win, but I'd have a harder job if some of the other good players in the school playground were on the opposite team. It made it a better game. So I'd take on it's not bad to say this, the inferior kind of group against a stronger group. And again, you know, from that age, I was just always evaluating players. I was always playing Championship Manager as a kid, always playing, you know, games, always watching games, going to games, thinking I would do things differently from as early as I can remember. And I knew, I didn't know. I always thought I'd be a much better coach and manager than I was player, because your playing and coaching ability was limited to your physical output, really, you know, in terms of how big you were, how fast you could run, what type of ability you had. And I always felt the aspects, the teaching, the coaching, the managing part of it was a lot about your relationships with people and your motivational skills, your psychological skills, your emotional skills, your malevolence sometimes to get people to do stuff they don't want to do. So I always felt this would be the more successful venture, but I've set myself a tough task because of, you know, the playing career I had, and, you know, became a full international obviously for a fleeting moment, but, you know, for me that was the apex, and still is the apex of being a young Englishman, is to represent the national team.
Was you as disciplined inside the classroom as you were outside of it then?
No, I wasn't. I mean, school came quite easy to me. I naturally sat in all the top sets in every school I was in without really, you know, exerting myself in terms of, you know, pushing me. You know, it wasn't a focus of mine. I always knew I was going to play football, and people would say prepare. You know, it's more chance of being struck by a meteorite, etc. You know, statistically, and I was like, I'm going to play. I'm going to make it. And I never had a plan B. You know, everyone was telling me prepare plan B, and I was like, I don't need one. I'm going to. So, really headstrong kid. You know, whenever I speak to my grandparents or my parents about what type of child I was, they were like, you knew where you were going. Like, you knew from a young age what you were going to do. Nobody could tell. You know, there's a kind of stubbornness about that. But I proved myself correct. So I can't, like, I speak to people all the time. They're like, well, how did you know you were going to make it? I'm just like, I just knew. I just knew I wanted it, and I knew I had the requisite ability, and I knew how much I was prepared to sacrifice to get there. I didn't think I was the best player. I always thought I was really smart in terms of I was always thinking, even, you know, I had to grow relatively streetwise where I come from, because if you don't survive the kind of council estate of Liverpool, you know, so you have to be streetwise. Certainly, as I say, on St John's Estate, you had to have your wits about you. And then you had to have discipline. You know, there's a lot of talented people in the world. I always believe everybody's got talent. Some people have more than others, obviously. Some people have got a little bit of a natural advantage there. But I think when it comes to discipline, and when it comes to your mind, the psychology, your self-talk, I think you absolutely control those two factors. So if you've got a bit of talent, and then you've got great self-control and great self-talk, you got a right chance of being successful at whatever it is you want. You know, it's the stamp collecting, if that's fishing, if that's playing football, if that's getting a degree, going into further education, you know, whatever that is. So I always had that mindset. Then I had, you know, my grandmother saying, you know, these aren't mythical figures. If you work hard, you know, she used to wait on, do the silver service, and she'd waited on the Queen and lots of, you know, famous people or celebrity type people. And she was like, they're no different to me and you. You know, the Queen's got 2 arms, 2 legs. You know, she's born to a certain family, but you can't be a member of the royal family unless you marry into it, which is going to be difficult for a Scouser from St John to Liverpool. But you know, everything else is pretty much attainable. And when it comes to football, you know, I believe it's a true meritocracy. You know, the harder you work and the more you're disciplined, the luckier you get. As I say, there's probably thousands of footballers more talented than me, but, you know, and you meet them in every boozer up and down the land on a Friday, Saturday night. But I was always dedicated, and I always used to remember people at 14, 15 started finding, you know, different things in life other than school and sports. You know, a bit of drink, you know, women come into, you know, the equation, all that kind of thing. And young men is a very vulnerable area, could be sidetracked. And I just remember I was like, I can't do any of that. I'm not the most talented player in the world, and I'm competing against people from all over the world to play in the Premier League and play for England. And unfortunately, I can't be a normal teenager. I've got to sacrifice my, you know, carefree younger years of going and, you know, experimenting with the world, because I've got to stay absolutely on it every single day to become a professional footballer if I want to play at the top. And, you know, you sacrifice your childhood, you know, driving and playing games everywhere. And again, the margin, you know, a lot of people do all of that and never get there, and that must be really, really tough. And as I say, I'm fortunate enough. You need a bit of luck, but also I had absolutely, there wasn't, like, I couldn't imagine a world where it didn't happen. It was like that, oh, that's going to happen.
So 100 games coming up to manage Rovers. In your playing career, Man City aside, you didn't reach 100 at any other club. Are you the sort of person then that kind of always
Did they not get anywhere else, no?
No, just at Man City. So you kind of always in looking for a new challenge, maybe?
No, not really, no. I mean, I was at Manchester City for 9 years, from the age of, I think, 17. You know, left, I think, 24 to go to Newcastle. I think I had 4 years at Newcastle, so, you know, you must have played, must have been 90 odd there, must have been. I had a couple of spells with injury there, so yeah, it probably curtailed me. And then after that, you know, you're 28, I think I went to QPR, that was interrupted with a spell in Marseille. 31 or 30, I go to Burnley. Had a year there, go to Rangers, come back 6-7 games after that, and then I'm pretty much start at the top and go out at the top. You know, I didn't do a loan or anything before. Just as my path would have it, I was meant to go on loan to Scunthorpe and got injured in the game. And as I say, you know, probably would have, you know, you see Scotty and Wheelo and Coetzee and them boys, you know, I probably would have done the same and gone and added the further 4 or 5 clubs, but I got banned for gambling from the FA, and that kind of put the end of it, and we start the managerial journey.
I was going to ask you, because you mentioned Marseille there, I was just going to ask you just briefly, was the culture just completely different on the playing side over there? Yeah, I mean, you know, you're in a foreign land with different customs and different cultures, and again, I loved it, you know, I just immersed myself in it, you know, thought, what can I learn from it? I'm always open to learning, and, you know, I always believe that no one can force anything upon you. You've got to open yourself up to it and then decide whether you want to accept it and add it to your toolkit or not, or keep it out. And I think, you know, people who just go through the world with one toolkit are limiting the chances of increasing their efficiency and increasing the levels of success. I think you should always be open to new ideas and again, always challenging your own ideas, because, you know, if they are the right things for you, they will stand up to that examination, and that's what doing a philosophy degree does for you. It just forces you to constantly attack even things that which could today be, you know, seen as a strength, and I don't need to focus on that. You know, that's fine, but I think you should have the process of challenging it to make sure it stands up, so that you still utilise it further going forward. So looking at the philosophical side of things, and what messages from all the managers... It's easy for you to say that, yeah. Thanks. Philosophical. All the managers that you played for, what have you learnt from them? What messages can you remember? I mean, it might actually be things that you don't want to sort of say.
Yeah, I think you go through life, don't you, with anyone that you're working for or positions of influence. You're always going, okay, I would do that, I wouldn't do that. Whether that's school teachers, coaches as a young person, kind of mentors in your life who come from, all different forms. I think you're always trying to add, as I say, new tools to your toolkit, and coaches are the same, coaches and managers are the same. And I think the ones, when I tend to look back at it now, it's not so much what they said, it's the way they made you feel. And Blackie used to say that to me all the time. People don't care what you know until they know how much you care, was a big saying of his. But also, people can't remember what you said to them. I can't remember, Joe Kelly, my school teacher. I can't remember what Mr. Kelly taught me, but I remember how he made me feel. I remember he really cared. He took time to listen to you, even if he didn't always act upon it. But he treated you with respect. And as I say, that's what the overriding factor with coaches. It's the same. It's managers who believed in you. Sometimes you learn lots from managers in terms of how not to do things. Like, there's been a few managers I've had where I'm like, right, I definitely wouldn't do that. I think it's unfair to name them. They're not able to defend themselves. But there's certainly a few who are considered kind of good managers by people who I'm like, I just would not build my cultures like that. But then, they've had success, and again, there's many ways to teach the game of football. There's not just one way, and to teach young people how to improve at it. So again, good, bad and indifferent. You are a amalgamation of all the different influences on your life, and I think this is where keeping a journal so key for me now. Since I met Blackie, when I was 29, 30, just giving yourself that constant resource tool of your own thoughts and feelings jotted down on paper. And I just feel like I'm doing a plug of this, but there's a really good documentary on Netflix that I watched last night called Stutz, which is Jonah Hill and his psychologist, I think, or his friend. Fascinating. And I think everybody could benefit from it. Certainly from a masculinity standpoint, I think when people are mentored and open, to be mentored and also mentor other people, other men, I think we have a strong society. I think when men stop speaking and lock themselves and try to deal with all the problems on their own, we end up with lots of issues. And women do it naturally a lot more easily than us. You see them and they share. It's just, with men, we're very insular in solving problems sometimes. And certainly, when it comes to football, I think the more it's our journey, it's a culture of solving problems at every single junction. Every game throws up different problems. I think when everybody takes responsibility, which is all that's happened since I've come to the football club, the key pillars of the club have come in and from afar or already been here and just started to take more and more influence. I mean, the president, the boss, being one of those, the fans, being there, playing their part, and again, us on the coaching side and the players on their side. I think when we all take accountability and responsibility for our output, and it means a lot to us, I think we can do incredible things. And certainly the last 12 months are a serious indicator of that.
Well, you certainly can't be accused of not being passionate about the job, Joe, but just this season, your name's kind of found its way into referees' notebooks. I know
just this season, my whole life.
But actually watching those matches, and you think, hang on, you're being watched first, aren't you? Is it difficult for you to deal with that now? Because
look, I don't help myself at times because I do get quite animated out there because I'm kicking every ball. You love your job, so it's an area I have to improve at for sure. I mean, I do have people on my case over that, believe it or not, who mentor me, and I get text messages when so the last couple of weeks I've had a red card from a ref, which is what it is. I shouldn't have sworn. I have to take the consequence of that. And then I had a yellow card in the Bolton game. So I suppose that's progress because I didn't swear. But also, they come to you at half time and go, yeah, sorry, I did make a mistake there. And then, for me, I've just got to try to detach from that situation. And again, it's one of the greatest challenges in life. It's if you don't protest and you don't ask for decisions, you're seen as too passive, and maybe as a manager you're aloof and you don't care. But if you try too much, you're a bit too aggressive, and I've got to find that balance there. But certainly getting booked, and it's just a distraction, and I have to be better in that space. It's part of an identification of where I need to improve.
So do you think then, Joe, at some time, do you think the team maybe is a bit harshly treated because of who the manager is? Do you think that's...
I don't think so, mate. I'll level with you. I watched Wycombe Pompey at the weekend. I just think, you see the Sky build up, and it was cameras everywhere and all over different parts of the club. And the referee on there, who we've had a number of times, he was a bathroom fitter. So fair play to him. He's got a job where he's, got to go in there and he's bread and butter, and he's got to keep fit. Then he's got to get up to speed with the opponent he's got, and then he's got to travel and referee the game. So it's incredibly tough for officials at our level. I mean, we're seeing, levels of officiating at the World Cup, which is arguably the best officials gathered all from around the globe. VAR and all these kind of things. And you've seen even then how difficult, the Japan goal against Germany, how difficult that would have been had VAR not been in. Imagine that was in our league, where it's so subjective because they don't have the 58,000 camera angles to back it up. And you can see how difficult it is for the officials at our level. So I'm all for making them all professional, because we're professional. All the teams in the pyramid are professional. How hard is it to find some funding to give, grassroots refereeing and build a program so that players develop? We're well aware of that, academies and all the structures we have in place to develop players. Well, we have to have the same for referees, and it can't just be, Conference, League 2, League 1. Well, it's amateur, you've got to go and then Championship and above is professional, and then expect the same standards of officiating in the same, in the bottom 3 tiers as the top 2 tiers, and no VAR. And I think it's tough for them, and again, I don't think they have an agenda. You might have the odd referee who doesn't like you for whatever reason, might be from a different country and whatever reason don't like you, or you've had history with them. I can get that, because that's human nature. But I think on the whole, the lads try the best, and it must be an unenviable task, because every decision you make, someone disagrees with it. It's almost as tough a job as ours. Every team I pick or every sub I make, there's 50,000 potential people who know how to do it better than me. And I think with the referee, depending on the attendance, there's usually 50-50, split in terms of some think he got it right, some think he got it wrong, and therefore the ref cannot win. So I do think it's tough for them, and I think we should all work harder, me included, behaving better to give them the best chance of policing the game. And, honestly, I've seen some of the behaviour at the World Cup, and I look at it and I go, I'm the same. I care deeply about winning to the point where it takes over rational behaviour, and that isn't good for the game. And I think the manager, I definitely need to set a better example. And I think as a group, I can't ask anybody to fall into line until my behaviour is exemplary, and I'll have to work on that.
Let's just finish off, Joe, with 3 snap questions then. So over the 100 games as manager, what's been your favourite moment? You need to say it.
Come on, do you know what I mean? Do we need to say that out loud? I don't know whether it was that or the last goal in it, but it has to be the day of the last game of the season. It has to be. Albeit selfishly, it could have been Connor's goal and Spenno's goal at Walsall, but I think just for that, it'll possibly not be done again. You know what I mean? When you win 7-0, and it could have been 9 or 10 had we needed it. It could have been. So it can't not be that day. Scunthorpe.
Hardest moment in the 100 games?
Hardest moments. Relegation was tough. That whole period was tough, because you're death marching, you have to walk along hand in hand, and it's on your CV, and you're like, I'd have been here, but it's yours. You got to live it and breathe it, and then honestly, I think that slow march towards League 2. was really, really tricky. But I'm trying to think of a real low point, a low game. But there was so many. You know, you were picking a team, and you were just hoping something could happen, and that's never a nice feeling. You know, when you're in hope. I don't like that. I like to prepare. I like to be prepared. I don't like the gods and hope.
Finally, forget about the 7-0. Favourite goal across the whole 100 games?
Favourite goal? It has to be Elliott's back post header. It has to be, and has to be. I mean, for him to score that at that end, for it to mean what it meant to everybody connected with the club, yeah, it has to be that.
I just said forget about it.
I can't forget about it. That's the best goal, isn't it? That's by far the best goal. Like there's not even close. It's hard. I mean, you could say the fourth goal in the 4-3 just for the pandemonium, but it will always be inconsequential compared to that last goal, because that was the magical moment, wasn't it? I mean, you just look at the fans' reactions, like it's just insane.